Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail is fast approaching. Okay, fast-ish. Yeah, we still have to wait till summer. But we just finished, wrapped up with a bow, the story of Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker. The final patch's MSQ is now in the rear view mirror. It is done, it's over. And in this spoiler-filled video, let's sit back, look at the landscape of Final Fantasy XIV, and see where this story could go for Dawntrail. I think most people have come to a consensus at this point that Dawntrail is going to serve, in terms of the function of the story, in either a vein similar to A Realm Reborn or Stormblood, where we are going to this new wacky location, and it's going to be largely world building and setting up for the next story. You may be asking, well, Jmulls, how does Stormblood kind of fit into that equation? I'm mainly referencing the patches there in regards to setting up for Shadowbringers and like moving us into that massive narrative arc with the Ancients and all that. And honestly, I kind of feel like Final Fantasy XIV Dawntrail will be more in the vein of Stormblood than akin to A Realm Reborn. See, A Realm Reborn was acting and serving as a starting point. Not everyone played 1.0. So 2.0, A Realm Reborn, had to act as people's gateway into the world of Eorzea and what would become known as Aetheris. They had to work from the ground up. They don't have to do that in Dawntrail. And I mentioned in my last Final Fantasy XIV video, this is one of Dawntrail's biggest strengths that it has going for it, that they don't have to go back to square one. They did not just develop the story of Hydaelyn and Zodiac for the last few expansions, or since A Realm Reborn. They've been building up the world, and one of the stories they happened to tell in that world was the Hydaelyn Zodiac arc, but it wasn't the only one. The world is largely established, with plenty of mystery and intrigue and adventure to be had, but we still have some basis to work with here, and that is going to be one of Dawntrail's greatest strengths. We have heard about the New World for a long time, a long time. We even had a little bit of a deep dive into the politics of the New World with the Blue Mage story. It wasn't a lot, but it at least salivates the mouth, yeah? It gets the taste buds to wake up. And largely what 6.55 was giving us more of a concrete foundation to work with for the New World, for Tural, which I can never remember if it's T-U-R or T-U-L. There's gonna be whole spelling bees just for the naming conventions in Dawntrail, you know it. Actually, that'd be kind of funny. Like Final Fantasy XIV spelling bee. Everyone loses when it gets to Limsa Lominsa, or like character names from there. But the story of Dawntrail is largely a question mark at this point in time. We know it's supposed to function, at least in the beginning, as a summer vacation, us going to the New World to rig an election, which is still one of my favorite memes about Dawntrail, even though we're technically not doing that. And if you want to get but actually, yeah, we know. But we're going to the New World to take a side to help pick the new leadership in a contest against, or at least involving, 4 contestants, if I read the 6.55 story correctly. Us as the Warrior of Light will be pairing up with Kryl, Alphinaud and Alize, Erenville, Grahatia, to aid Wuk-Lamat to win this contest and to claim the throne of Tuli-Yalol. Whereas the other members of the Scions of the Seventh Dawn will be aiding someone else for their ascension to the throne. And also, because it's Emmett Selk who told us this, we're gonna go find the cities of gold in the New World. And if that wasn't enough, we have places like Solution 9 to look forward to, which throw a massive wrench in this proverbial gear. With a few more foundational pieces set in from 6.55, in the grand scheme of things, we still largely don't know what's going to happen in Dawntrail. I think it's one of the reasons that Dawntrail is so compelling to me right now. We have this working base to work off of, but there's still so much mystery and intrigue and an entire new world, get it, to develop and flesh out and for us to fall in love with. And how exactly this new narrative arc will tie, or at least tie into some grander theme. It won't be Hydaelyn and Zodiac, and I kind of fall in line with Jesse Cox in this idea that it's going to be very much focused on Azem as a character or his personal journey. I think the post-patch content of Endwalker will give us a clue in some regard though, and that this will eventually tie itself into the void. They have clearly set up that shard hopping will eventually become a major focal point of the storyline, maybe not in Dawntrail, but in a few expansions down the line, possibly. Because I imagine they want to do a Mercedes story at some point. That has to be on the table. Maybe it's 8.0, maybe it's only a zone of something in 8.0, we don't know. We have to wait and see. But if I'm willing to bet on where this overall story will go at some point in the future, I'm willing to bet that the Void will play a central part just because of all the development they gave it in the patches of Endwalker. Other people have pointed out, and pointed out correctly, that story with Golbez and Zero kind of mirrors in a lot of ways in terms of the community reception to it, and just its overall placing in the story, the Warriors of Darkness from Heavensward, and how if you don't know where the story of Final Fantasy XIV is going, and you get to that Warriors of Darkness story in Heavensward, you will probably think that it's filler, and that it was a one-and-done story that was self-contained because it has a beginning, middle, and an end. But then, lo and behold, we get the Shadowbringers, and it becomes this central key characteristic of the overall narrative, not just for Shadowbringers, but also for all of Final Fantasy XIV up to that point. I think it's clear that going in that direction for the Golbez Zero story, the only question is when are they going to bring it back into the focal point, because it could very well be multiple expansions down the line. One of Final Fantasy XIV's greatest strengths in terms of storytelling is playing the long game, setting up these dominoes right now where we may not know everything about them, but we have some kind of self-contained, or at least supposedly self-contained narrative that will become massively consequential down the line. They expanded on the world, how we can transfer energy from one shard to the other, stuff like that. The story of Golbez and Zero and the 13th and the Void in general, as well as continuing to expand on the story of the first, I guarantee you will become massively consequential down the line, and I think the whole premise of this new narrative arc will result in some way or somehow the further restoration of both the Void and the light-scarred world of the first. I think that's where this is all going to lead to. I have a few crazy theories out there that I think are possible, but I'm not sure if they want to go this way. So, just take this as like theory crafting in its purest form. Because I think this will take expansions for this part of the story to even get introduced. I think at some point, the reason that Dawntrail is like the first main expansion for this new arc will become apparent, and I think Solution 9 is the key central reason for that, or at least the origins of Solution 9. I think it's kind of obvious that Solution 9 is within that giant like orb in the sky over like Arizona, whatever that new zone is, or at least in that direction. And one of the main problems we have had so far in terms of restoring the Void and the First to their former glory is just time. It takes time to transfer energy from the First to the 13th. It only goes one way. We only have so many resources at our disposal to transfer stuff from the First to the 13th with. I think Solution 9 will be a focal point in that problem solving that we're going to have to do at some point. And the technology that ancient civilization that Solution 9 originated from will come into the focal point of the story in terms of us being able to bring in mass quantities light from the First to the 13th, or some other fix that we come up with. I think the next few expansions will go somewhere along the lines of we go to the New World in Dawntrail, then we go to Mare Stadia for whatever reason in 8.0, or we go to a new shard and then they'll do the other one. So it'll either go New World, Mare Stadia, insert shard here, or it'll go New World, New Shard, back to Mare Stadia. One of the most interesting lines of dialogue in that entire final bit with Emmett Selk in Ultima Thule to me, and something that always stood out to me, was Emmett Selk's emphasis on the idea that the stuff that is going on in the other shards is like beyond our imagination. He really built it up as if it's some grander thing with works and constructs we couldn't even begin to fathom. And when it comes to Final Fantasy XIV and insert outside world having a bunch of technology here, that's almost never a good thing, because with the amount of references they've been doing to Final Fantasy IX lately, I'm just looking to Terra and Gala. I think it's entirely possible that one of the storylines they want to pursue going into the future is, because it's intrinsic to the narrative of Final Fantasy games, we need to have an insert bad empire here. We just flat out don't have one anymore at the fall of Garlemald. They're setting up the idea that, oh, if this one jabroni rises to power in the new world, he'll unite all the clans even further, or whatever, and then begin an imperialistic conquest of Aldenald and all that kind of stuff. They're setting that up, but I feel like they're building up to something even greater. I think in one of the other shards out there, there will be an entire empire that has taken over the entire shard, and will now start to like wage like inter-shard warfare. Yeah, this kind of like trends into fanfic territory, but I'm just trying to think about, okay, it's Final Fantasy XIV, what are the types of stories they like to tell? How do they like to tell them, and how do they like to develop them? We know they love foreshadowing. It's one of their favorite things to do. So I've come to the conclusion that oftentimes trying to pick apart the exact words, while it may be viewed as overthinking to some, sometimes that may be the exact thing we have to do if we want to get a grasp as to where this story could go in the future. And I think they've been doing it for a while. I think Emmett's still putting a lot of emphasis on the shards. Him being a former Emperor of Garlemald as well, being another little maybe tease there. Them introducing a lot of parallels to Final Fantasy IX, or at least a lot of like wink wink nudge nudge stuff to Final Fantasy IX. And them being able to utilize concepts and even characters from previous Final Fantasy games, but to make them all of their own. Like, Golbez is a character that existed in Final Fantasy IV. The Final Fantasy XIV version of Golbez is different. He has the same name-ish and same armor set, and the story kind of has a parallel to Final Fantasy IV, but the Golbez character in Final Fantasy XIV is a Final Fantasy XIV character. I imagine they're going to do something similar with other concepts from other Final Fantasy games before, because that's something that Final Fantasy XIV just loves to do at the end of the day. And I don't mind. Final Fantasy XIV is a brilliant game in of itself, but is also a massive love letter to this series. And I can't imagine that just because the Heidelin Zodiac arc ended, that they're going to stop doing that. I think it's a given that at some point we'll go to Mercedia, duh. They've been teasing it for years. They even teased it in the patches of Endwalker, with Asdaya and all that. It's just a matter of when. And it's a matter of when we go to the other shards. And they can really drag those shards out. Remember, the 13th and the 1st are kind of special circumstances to our understanding. The other shards should be entire worlds that mirror the size of Heidelin. Or I guess now Atheris. If they really wanted to, they could take their time with each of these shards and give us multiple expansions just exploring those locations. And there's still plenty of stuff to do in our world. Hell, they can easily do 3 expansions by themselves in just the new world. We're only exploring the middle part of the new world. There's still the northern part, and then the extreme southern part, which they have started to tease as though the geographical formations there, or geological formations, the environment, the climates there, even the people that live there, they've started to drip feed that. So who knows, maybe the next 3 expansions don't go the way of the roadmap I laid out earlier, which was New World, Mercedia, Shard, or New World, Shard, Mercedia. It could very well go Central New World, Northern New World, or Southern New World, and do that for 3 expansions, or do Northern New World and Southern New World in its own separate expansion. But they could do that. They could also do the thing they did in Stormblood where it's a giant part of the map, we'll just make it one dungeon. We don't know. Or do the thing they did in Shadowbringers, which is, yeah, you know the rest of the world that was overtaken by the Flood of Light? Yeah, that's one raid tier. Not one raid tier, but one raid series, you know. At the end of the day, we don't know, but that's kind of the fun of it, in my opinion. I think theory crafting is really fun when you simply don't have a lot of information. Theory crafting for Final Fantasy is notoriously fun. The stories tend to be pretty damn good, especially for Final Fantasy XIV. And when, over the course of like a decade or more, you have developed a reputation for thoughtful foreshadowing and being able to recontextualize stuff and just telling amazing stories effectively and engrossingly, well, that builds confidence in people's desire to want the theory craft because they believe, and I believe, that they have the tool set and the knowledge and the ability to tell interesting stories in both the short term and the long term. And at the end of the day, we don't know a lot about where this new arc will go. We don't know what even the theme will be. We just know that Dawntrail is a starting point, and maybe that's even up in the air. Because probably, if I would have hazard a guess, that Golbez Zero storyline in the 13th, that was the real starting point for this story. And that will be a seed that will blossom and grow into some massive tree down the line that we can benefit from. And there's so many parallels that we can probably think of in regards to relating the stuff that they've set up for Dawntrail already to previous Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy 8 and 9 are kind of the 2 big ones in a lot of ways, for a lot of people. And for all we know, they could be drawing up a parallel between the Ceruleum of the New World and Mist from Final Fantasy 9. If you know, you know. And you know how big of a narrative arc that could be in of itself if that is some avenue they want to go down. So whether or not this new narrative arc is like firmly rooted and centralized on the new world and us exploring the entirety of it over multiple expansions, or it'll somehow culminate in us going back to the 13th and Zero and Golbez being central and pivotal to the story at some point, which I imagine they will at some point, is the main key factor here. Or if they do the thing that I think they're going to do at some point, which is, I can't imagine that we're gonna go too long in a Final Fantasy game without there being some kind of big bad empire placeholder. I can't imagine they'll do Garlemald again. We'll probably feel the aftershocks of Garlemald in some form of fashion, but I imagine with all the shards they have at their disposal that they can work off of and utilize to their advantage and storytelling prowess, I can't imagine they don't want to set one aside and have some massive big bad that they can have and drip feed and introduce over the course of many years from one of the shards. And maybe that shard finds a way to easily traverse armies across different shards, both soul and body, and some massive breakthrough in terms of the lore could happen because of that. Or that entire story will happen because they have a breakthrough, or because they get that information somehow. And there's still a lot of mystery in terms of the backstory of Final Fantasy XIV. I'm pretty sure there's an entire, age that we just don't know what happened in, or we have extremely little information. And even in the other ones, we really only expanded on Allag, and they can easily expand on that more. I'm not even convinced that Solution 9 is from Allag. I'm not. It could be, don't get me wrong. It could be Allagan. I'm not convinced that it is, though. I think one of my favorite things to do in Dawntrail will be to, micromanage and break down every line of dialogue, just for whatever possible foreshadowing these lines of dialogue could have. And I imagine that when all is said and done and we look back to that Emmett Silk speech, of him going through all the places we have to visit, that's going to get recontextualized a ton. It's already starting to get recontextualized. And for the pieces of the puzzle to really start to show themselves, I think that emphasis he did for the other shards will become of paramount importance. Though some of those shards having things beyond our imagination, or however he phrased it, yeah, that could be really cool and positive and uplifting. It's Final Fantasy XIV, though. You know it's gonna get a little bit screwy at some point, and a little bit dark and macabre. And I can't imagine all those denizens of all those other shards will be necessarily friendly to us, knocking on their chamber door. Or maybe, like I think will happen eventually down the line, based on precedent in previous Final Fantasies, and how Final Fantasy XIV likes to take certain stories from other Final Fantasies and retrofit them to fit Final Fantasy XIV. One of those shards could be coming a knockin' at our chamber door. And unlike Grahatia, we'll get more than burgers here, or tacos. At the end of the day, Final Fantasy XIV is a world that is so captivating to explore and find out more about, but it's also really fun to theorycraft because they've garnered a reputation of being expert storytellers, plot writers, etc., etc. When you have established that trust and foundational base of support and adoration, people are more willing to spend the time to pick apart each line of dialogue and to overthink things because they have the confidence that that will be warranted or at least pay off in some way or fashion down the line. Hell, we could be entirely wrong, and we can look back at all the things that we misjudged and say, oh, that's cool, how did I misread that? That is an appeal all of itself. It's just fun. And I'm excited for Dawntrail. I really am. And with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. And if you enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload and stream in the future, because you know I'll be covering Dawntrail all the way up and past its release. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.